Welcome back to the channel. This is The Casuals. I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And today's episode is Anime Adventures or Memories. I'm forgetting the title at the moment just because I'm so scuffed at the moment. But today's anime we're going to talk about is Do It Yourself, or DIY for short. And this is a kind of a, I guess, unexpected anime that I ended up showing to Saki because, one, it's just I only had recently discovered the, from now on I'm going to refer to it yourself as DIY for the anime title. But I had only recently discovered DIY, the anime, like only like a week or two before I ended up showing it to you. And I thought it was just, kind of like a cute little story that had some, good elements of DIY in it. And I wasn't actually too sure whether or not you were gonna, enjoy it because you yourself have experience with like, DIY stuff, or at least with like, the tools involved in DIY. And so, yeah, would you like to go over your experience of like, what you've done in terms of DIY or just in like the tools in general before we get started talking about this anime?
Yeah, sure. So, my experience starts when I was a kid, because my father kind of did his own DIY stuff when, renovating the house that we lived in. So, of course, as a boy, I was just kind of naturally drawn to it. Guys like building or destroying stuff, right? It's just a guy thing. So, as a kid, I always tried to help my dad, bring him the tools or whatever, just help him hold something while he, drills it into the wall or into whatever it was. So it starts way back. And then, as I got older, I was able to start doing things on my own, working with, the heavy equipment that you would see in the DIY anime. And so the DIY stuff I usually would do is more of woodworking. So you would take, scraps of wood, or not really scraps, but like just like pieces of wood, and kind of build something to make a wall look pretty or something. So it's not just, a plain wall with paint. You'd add some design and texture to it. That's kind of the extent of DIY that I did.
And for me, I have basically zero DIY experience. Funny enough, despite being surrounded by, like, I would say, tools for DIY, I never really interacted with them because I grew up basically with video games. And I was obsessed with video games when I was younger. So that's what I grew up with. That's where my interest was catered towards, or veered towards. And so I never was, how older people are like these days, youngins don't even know how to, like, change the oil in their car, or, change the tire. I'm one of those kids, admittedly. I straight up just don't know how to change a tire. I should, honestly. Hopefully I'll get to that one day. And I don't know how to like do any of the basic DIYs, right? That, may seem obvious for other people. But yeah, that was my experience. So when I watched DIY, I didn't really see the DIY, the anime, sorry. I didn't really have any issues with it, but you had just a little bit of issues with it during certain parts, which we'll probably get to when we talk about it. But let's talk about the anime itself. So, DIY the anime. It's basically revolves around mainly one protagonist, which is Yuo Serufu. Like, her name is basically a play on yourself. So, gosh, I'm forgetting her name again. But basically, she's shown to be clumsy, right? You remember her being clumsy, right?
Oh yeah, she's very clumsy.
Give me a second. I'm forgetting her name, but I'll have her name just up right now. I guess I'm professional. It's literally. Oh no, so I was right. Her name is Yua. That's her last name, and then her first name is Serifu. But because the way Japanese reads out their name, they typically say the last name first and then the first name. So it turns out to be Yua Serifu. That's her full name. Um, and so she's the really clumsy one, you know. And then we have her secondary, I guess, quote unquote protagonist, like part of the, you know, same group, which was Miku, Surire Miku, who was like the, you know, all about high tech. Do you remember her? She was like basically like, humanity is at its tech. Why are you doing something musty like, you know, do DIY, you know?
Yeah, she kind of gave off that vibe of kind of I'm better than you.
Elitism.
Yeah.
And so immediately we're already like seeing like two contrasts where one person's living in like kind of like the normal, you know, what we would be currently living in, right? And then the other one's living in like the future where she has like a AI like robot that helps her with her daily life, you know, who's really weird. By the way, mind you, remember that the freaking tentacle thing, whatever.
Oh yeah, I do want to talk about him later because that guy was low key kind of funny.
His name is Kurage-san. He's basically a jellyfish. What's that? Is it Tentacruel from Pokemon?
Yeah, Tentacruel.
Yeah, he's basically like that if you think about it. Without the
that
eyes or
sharp-
anything, but like a very cute and chubby version of it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have like a sharp beak thing. Too.
Yeah.
It's like the little. It's like a bubbly jellyfish. It's just kinda, it's not very threatening looking.
Yeah, and so, you know, it was very intriguing as to why, you know, Serifu, the main character, the main protagonist, was riding a bike and everything, you know. And so, I think your first introduction to quote unquote DIY was Rei, Yasaku Rei, the orange-haired girl. Do you remember her?
Yeah, she was like the group leader, right?
Yeah,
Was that her?
basically the group leader. Her first introduction was because Serifu crashed her bike. Do you remember that? And her
That is right. I
her
remember.
bike got messed up, and then this is where the first nitpick happened immediately.
I remember.
Do you want to go over what happened with your nitpick?
Sure. So Serifu is riding her bike, and you know how she's clumsy, so she crashes it. And then the other, I forget her name, the
Rei.
redhead girl, Ray. She just kind of appears behind her. What was she riding? Like those hoverboard type things?
It was like it's like a wheelies, you know, the shoe wheelies, but like not a shoe, but like just a platform kind of thing. Like, you know, one wheel on each shoe.
Okay, I don't remember that exactly, but anyways, yeah. So she was doing that. She kind of pops up and she offers to help. You know, Serifu up. You know, make sure she's okay. And then he's like, "Oh, your bike's, you know, not aligned. I can fix that for you." And she pulls out tools and she starts fixing it. And I forget what the tool was, but I'm like, that is definitely not for bikes. I'll tell you that. It was more for like, was it like pliers or something?
Wasn't it a wrench?
No, wrenches you can. Oh,
It was when she
Anyway,
was fixing the. It was when she was fixing the wheel, like not the wheel, but like, you know, she was adjusting that like thing that holds the chain.
yeah.
It was one of those turning wrenches, whatever, you know, where like it makes that clicking sound.
Okay, so a socket wrench.
Yeah.
So she was using that on a chain, and I'm like, what in the OSHA crap is this? I'm like, that has nothing to do with fixing a chain, first of all. You don't even need a tool to fix the chain. You just kind of put it back on the track, spin the pedals, and it'll catch on itself and it'll readjust itself. So I was right there, I was a little bit questioning the anime. And this was what, like 5 minutes in?
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, if this is how it's going, I'm not sure how much we could watch. And so that was the very first nitpick, and let me tell you, OSHA would not be proud.
And the second nitpick was after. So she did one thing correctly, which was when the bike itself, the handle and the wheel itself was misaligned.
Mm-hmm.
And so what she did correctly was she put the wheel between her legs, right, in order to keep it in place, and then she, you know, forcefully moved it, right.
Yeah, she forcefully adjusted the handlebar. The wheels
Yeah.
are fine. It's the handlebars that turn. That
Yeah.
got me.
And that is correct. You do that.
Yeah.
And The second part was when she decided to tighten the the handlebar. Like the you know what I mean? She tightened the like the nut, the screw nut. There we go, the nut or washer. I'm forgetting the exact term.
What's a nut?
The nut that like connects the kind of like bar between from the handle to like the wheel holder. She tightened that, and you were just like, "Why is she doing that?"
Yeah, you didn't really have to do much for that. Since the nut wasn't already loose, she was just tightening and already. It's like trying to screw in a screw, but it's already been fully screwed in. You just keep going just because you can.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's kind of a waste of time.
And so that was your first nitpick. But then, I was like, inaccuracies are bound to happen. No, you can't get everything perfect, in terms of anime and in terms of realism too.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was just normal, It wasn't like that, like atrocious to the point where it's like, oh my god, like what is this, right? And so we move on to like, fast forward a little bit, and then Serifu encounters Rei again, right? This time she's in a kind of like a workshop shack, where Rei hangs out because that's her club,
A clubhouse thing.
clubhouse thing, yeah, club room, but it's outside. And so she's like making this like key holder.
Is it a key holder or?
It was a key holder. But it wasn't even really a key holder. She just nailed a nail to the wall, and that's it.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't really.
Yeah, that wasn't really. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just like, okay, like I guess. And so she's like, Serifu was curious, being the curious person she is, and then, oh yeah, she was making a bookshelf. That's what it was. After,
Yeah.
And so, Rei being like, oh, she might be interested. I'll let you have a try at it. And Serifu's like, okay, right. And so they use those electric drills, right?
Uh-huh.
And then here's the second part where you're like, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Do you want to explain it too?
Okay, if I remember correctly, there were two things that was kind of questionable.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one being the clamps
Yeah.
holding the thing, the bookshelf to like, I think it was the table, or was it to itself?
To itself.
To itself. So one, the clamps were like not practically put on. I think it was just mainly to show that they were using it, but like they were kind of in the way to where you were trying to put your screw.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little odd to me. And then the second one was when Serifu was using the drill. It was a very dangerous way. Basically, I think she was just holding it just with her hands, no like leverage or anything. She just she pulled the little trigger on the thing, which makes the drill bit spin to screw something in. And it just, there's no leverage, so you have no weight or pressure to keep the bit into the screw.
Mm-hmm.
And it just flew out of the screw and like scratched the whole thing. I'm like, that could be very dangerous. Like if her hand was there, she just stabbed a hole in her hand.
Yeah.
And so I was like, OSHA.
And then the third one was the way the bookshelf was placed, because imagine an L, but almost upside, like a more elongated L on both sides where it's even, and then it's like kind of like on top of the table making a triangle, essentially like a tent. That's how the bookshelf was placed, and you were like, that's not how that has no support.
Yeah, because if you think about it logically, if there's just a shelf on the table and nothing's holding it down, and you're not holding it down, and you try to drill in a screw, you do what Serifu did, and the drill just goes haywire. Or two, you drill and you just push it along the table until it falls off the table because there's nothing holding it down.
Yeah, and so that was an issue. And then Serifu being Serifu, she ended up, what's it called? Just, when she tried drilling, it like flew all over the place and made her fall over, and she caused the tumble. By the way, Serifu has apparently made a very large consecutive streak to going to the nurse's office.
As the nurse said, perfect attendance.
Yes, perfect attendance for showing up at the nurse's office. So that tells you a lot about her, clumsiness, And so there was a lot of various projects, but it would take forever to go over them all. But I guess so. I guess we'll go over the more memorable ones. So we ended up being introduced to the another character named Hikage Takumi. She's the glasses girl. Remember the shy glasses girl?
Oh yes, the other like friend of hers.
Yeah, and so she had like a natural talent at the DIY stuff. More natural talent because she did the whole like kind of like pasting stuff on it. I don't remember what it's called.
I want to say more design than the DIY.
Design.
She had kind of like an eye for presentation. There you go.
Yeah, and so she basically got the basics right away. I would say she got the basics right away, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd say basics were pretty spot on, like already kind of known.
Yeah,
her.
and the thing she did was when she put it on the board. I'm forgetting what it was, but you had experience with it, right?
With what?
Putting stuff like gluing the stuff on the board, whatever. You know what I mean? How she made that like DIY sign.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk about your experience for that?
Basically, for my experience, I didn't really in the DIY anime. It was like little. What do they call it? Sea glass or something? That they collected to put on the little sign they were making for their club, right? So I think that's what it was. But
Yeah.
my experience is, wood to wood, not, little sea glass or whatever to wood. So I would use, just normal wood glue with clamps to hold it down to let it set dry and then it'll stick together. But I noticed she was using, I forget what kind of paste it was, but do you remember the paste? I really don't
remember the paste, but you said that it was the right kind of paste.
Yeah, it was the correct paste. It wasn't, wood to wood, like wood glue paste. It was a different type of adhesive, which I was like, oh, they actually got that right, which was kind of surprising considering what I saw in the first like 15 minutes.
Yeah. And
that was a shock.
Yeah. And then, we were introduced to that, and then, they were looking for more members. And so at this point, they had 3 members for the club. And the 4th one came, and her name, you're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna remember her initial name, but
No, I don't even remember the nickname.
And so her initial name was called her actual name is Julia Queen Elizabeth the VIII.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all.
And so they were like, yeah, it's too complicated. Except for Serifu. For somehow Serifu perfectly recites her name in English, which was bizarre at the time. It's just like, wait a minute, what? But yeah, and then they're like, oh yeah, let's just call her Jobco, right?
Oh yeah, that was her nickname, Jobco.
And so Elizabeth or Jobco, we're gonna just refer to her as Jobco. That's what she's actually referred to in the anime. She had more experience with DIY, but she was very, very haughty about it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember her being a little more
Like she had an attitude.
the greatest at it kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like she's kind of like the same of who I talked about, Miku, where she was like, oh, like, DIY is dusty and moldy, why should I care? But as it turns out, she really likes DIY. And mind you, she's, as her name suggests, she's, English. Julia Queen Elizabeth the VIII. And so the voice actor for her was Japanese, but she would speak in English a lot of the times. And I remember you were kind of surprised by how the English was actually decent for for like a Japanese native person that only lived in Japan, I would assume.
Yeah, I was actually surprised because usually, anything dubbed is not very good. So when, the little bits of English here and there, I was like, oh, that's actually, not as bad as, I've heard before. I'm like, this is bearable.
I can understand it.
Yeah, I was like, I understand it. It's not cringy. It kind of goes well with the character. It's not like, the girl's like, what, let's just say 14 in the anime, and then like in real life they're like 40 and they sound like they're 40 and not like a little girl. So I was like, oh, it's actually pretty accurate.
Funny enough, I think she was like 13-year-old or 14-year-old. She skipped a couple of grades.
That's right. She was a lot younger. But yeah, it was just like, wow, they kind of actually hit it on the nail there. It was like, no pun intended, but I was like, wow, yeah, that's actually not bad. It was, to me, it was, more accurate than what I've, heard before in other animes.
Yeah, and so the last member made a very interesting impression, who was Koki Kokoro. She was the parkour girl.
Ah, yes, the cat girl.
Yes, the cat girl. And so she was parkour. She was very much a, energetic, athletic girl,
Yeah.
And so she fit in perfectly well with the club. There was one gimmick that she had, which she would end her sentence with meow, like meow, a lot of times, which kind of got annoying towards the end, because, it's literally almost every sentence. Almost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was able to, I was used to that kind of stuff, so I didn't, really care. But for someone like, you who doesn't really watch anime, who's not really into, the whole, I would say, culture of, I wouldn't say obscured, but kind of like weird ways of talking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was, it's very understandable why you didn't like it, or it started to get annoying at the end. Surprisingly, it took you a while for you to actually start getting a little annoyed.
Yeah,
I was
I think it
surprised.
was kind of closer to the end of the actual animes, because there were 2 seasons, right?
One.
Oh, was it 1? Oh,
It was
geez,
only
okay.
one.
Then yeah, near the end, I was just like, okay, it was funny at first. Now it's just kind of getting annoying, kind of thing.
Yeah. And so there, the club forms. They finally get all their members for now, and so they started doing a lot of different projects. One of the first other projects was really they had a goal, which was make a treehouse, right?
Yes, their big club treehouse.
And basically from, I would say, episode 4 or 5 up to the very end, which was episode 12, literally everything up to that point was really leading up to the goal of making a treehouse. So their solution was raise funds from their own DIY makings to sell them and get the money to purchase stuff that they need, which is the tree bolt attachment, I believe it's called, right? Tree attachment bolt? Yeah, it's called tabs.
Yeah, it was a tabs. Basically, it's a very heavy-duty bolt that you drill into the tree to support, a lot of weight, like a treehouse with people in it, so it doesn't fall over.
Yeah, and you put the planks on top of it.
Yes.
So, those costed like $100, I guess. I think that's what they said during the current. For what they said, I'm pretty sure.
Per bolt.
Per bolt, yeah, per bolt. And so they needed to raise, quite a bit of money. Remember, these are school kids.
They don't have jobs.
And so, I think this was the funny part where I think you kind of enjoyed this, where Jabako kept on pulling out her credit card.
Yep, she's like, oh, I'll just pay for it because she's really rich.
Yeah,
I think the cat girl also was rich, right?
Yeah, she was rich. So, Jabako's dad was a famous, really famous pioneer in technology. And so she has a black card. Black cards are typically referred to as like super rich. Like, if you have a black card, you're like, in
the top percent.
Yeah, you're in the absolute top percent, because you could spend however much you want on that, credit card. It's limitless, essentially. The reason why it's limitless is because, they know that you can pay it off,
Yep. They have the trust that you will pay off your bill.
And so Kokoro, the parkour girl, also was rich, but she was under a family of merchants. And so, yeah, she was there, and they're like, yeah, let's purchase it with our money. And, the club leader being the club leader was like, no, we can't do that. That's not how we do things in the club, right? If it was like, outside out, kind of like a friends meeting, maybe. I mean, sure. But, like, she's like, we have to abide by, kind of like club spirit.
And rules.
Yeah. And so they went off to make DIY stuff. And so I think, what's it called? I remember you were kind of like, kind of like a little bit surprised when we got to the point where they went to Ray's house, right? Because Ray is daughter of like her parents are owners of like a, how do you say this? kind of like a family workshop, I guess is how you describe it.
Basically, like a mom and pop Home Depot.
Yeah, mom and pop Home Depot would be a better way, an apt way of describing it. And so you were surprised because like when it showed like all the various like stuff that they owned, it was kind of accurate in terms of like their selections.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised. There was one thing in the store that I've never seen like before, but I thought it was interesting.
Which was the vertical saw, right?
The vertical table saw. Usually on a table saw, it's laid down like a table, and there's a blade in the middle that spins, and you push the wood along, and it'll cut. But theirs was vertical. And gravity is not really a good friend of yours with that. Because the blade is spinning super fast. So if you're not really careful, and you have like, let's say a thin piece of wood, and you're cutting it, and you're not holding it really firm, that wood is going to fly up and smack you right in the face or in the hand or something, and you're going to get hurt.
And I remember that vertical saw was not like a regular table saw where it's like in the table, right? He like brought it, the saw itself was an attachment, kind of like a lever, and then he brought it down.
Yeah, so it was like a vertical table saw, but the saw blade portion was like a chop saw.
Yeah.
Which was really strange. It's like combining two things together.
It's like those giant paper cutters, you know what I mean? Like those those like where they have like the table, the slicer.
Yeah. Imagine a big paper cutter but vertical.
Yeah,
and
it's essentially that. It's literally just that.
Instead of like a long like razor blade, just pretend it's a giant saw blade.
And so that was interesting, but I'm pretty sure that's an actual thing out there in the world. But it's just, I don't think it's just coming here in the United States just because, OSHA!
Yeah, that and I've never seen ones, but I have a table and a chop saw, but not a table chop saw.
That is vertical, at least to say.
That is vertical, yeah.
But that was interesting. I thought it was just a little bit cool the way he was using it. But practicality-wise, I don't know if it's viable or not, as you said. Because gravity is your enemy in these cases.
Yeah, because you need to put a lot of force, or at least for their sake, maybe like clamp the wood down so it doesn't move at all. Because if you're trying to get a precise cut, and it's not being strapped down or held down really well, it's just your cut will go straight down, but it'll curve a little, so you don't get a straight line cut.
Yeah.
So that was my other thing. I was like, how do you get a good straight cut with that thing?
And so that was one interesting thing. And then they went on to move on to making their own little projects. The first notable one was the resin, the little seashell things.
Yeah.
Resin. You've had experience with it before, right?
Not with resin, no.
Oh, okay. It was kind of interesting, I would say. Just seeing them use resin to decorate like the shells. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember. It was all new to me, so because I've never used resin, but I've seen resin, but I've never personally used it. So I was like, oh, that's how you use it? Okay, that's cool,
As assuming that they are accurate, we're taking their word for it.
True, that is true.
So it could be completely wrong. Like, anyone who watches this and knows anything about resin, though, and happens to know the do-it-yourself anime, and you could be like, no, that's wrong. We'll never know. I don't think we'll ever do it, but who knows? Maybe in the future we will. If it's accurate, yay. If it's not, oh well. And the second one was the coffee, coffee dripper or whatever, coffee drip holder.
Yeah, with the metal pipes or something. Was it that one?
Yeah, the metal rebars or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but you were just like, where's the protection goggles?
Yeah, none of them really wore safety goggles or gloves. What if you get a splinter? No one sanded the wood. No one. I was just like, what? And I do remember they were staining the wood and then cutting it.
Yeah, I remember you were complaining.
Why would you do that? You gotta cut it, and then you stain it.
Well, the funny thing is, when they were making the coffee drip, they stained the wood and then cut it, right? But then right after, when Jabako was making her laptop stand, or laptop holder, tablet holder, she cut the wood, did everything, and then stained it. You're like, how is she doing it correctly right after?
I know, because let's say you do stain it first and then you cut it. You just messed up the stain. And if you restain it, let's say a piece of it chips off, you got to restain it, and the other surface area has more stain if you've done it once or twice, and that has one layer while the other have two layers, so it's gonna look a little different. So you
Yeah.
just do it once at the end after you're done with all the cuts, so you don't have to worry about that problem.
It was just bizarre because it literally was one sequence after another, and somehow those two did the complete opposite steps, you know?
Yep.
And this was on the animators too. It's not like it was like, a real person doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So it was very confusing for you, but you're just like, whatever, right? And then I think another one you nitpicked was the glue. When she glued the laptop to me, you're like, that's kind of weird.
I don't remember.
I think it was something like you were just saying, like, it was just kind of weird for her to glue that stuff without any support or something. Or no, she was gluing too many things.
Oh yeah, she was gluing a bunch of little parts together, and I'm like at the same time, and I'm like, that's fine, but you gotta secure it somehow, because if you don't secure it, the bubbles in the glue, because it's not coming out like solid, so there's little pockets of air. And so when you put a piece of wood and then the glue and then another piece of wood, if you don't like again clamp it down, you don't get the air out, so the wood rises a little, so it's not like touching, the other piece of wood like firmly.
Yeah.
So it could break a lot easier.
And not to mention, it was raining that day, so drying the glue must have taken forever.
Oh yeah, that too. Because little side note story thing. I was using wood glue like a couple months before we watched this, and I was fixing a chair because there are wooden dowels that hold the chair together, but they were getting loose because the chair is like 50 years old. So I started using wood glue and clamps, and it literally took like overnight, which is like at least 8 hours, and it wasn't fully dry in the morning. Like it takes a long time. And I used a little bit of glue, and that girl was using a lot of glue, so that probably took like at least a day.
But it was good right after.
Yeah, that unless it was like, Gorilla Glue or something where it's like instant. I don't know how it dried that quickly.
And then in this case, where I would just say it's for the anime sake,
Yeah.
So understandably, they're not gonna like show the entire super accurate process of wood glue drying for 8 hours. They just had to do it for story's sake, just move it along. But yeah, that was one, unrealistic thing about it. And then, before we move on to the next topic, you want to talk about Kurage, who is the the tentacle robot, which you thought was very funny.
Oh yeah. So her name was Miku.
Mm-hmm.
What was her nickname? Pudding?
Yeah, pudding.
I don't know why, but her nickname was Pudding. And so throughout the anime, her little AI robot butler kind of thing,
Kurage.
jellyfish, was literally like, "Oh, I'm helping you, blah blah blah. Do you need help with this? Do you want me to, draw a bath for you?" And every now and then it would hint at, "Hey, do you mind if I get an upgrade?" and Pudding like completely ignored it the whole anime until like the last episode when he finally got his upgrade.
And it wasn't even he got the upgrade; someone else upgraded him, I think.
Wasn't it Jabuko?
No. So actually, we don't even know who upgraded because it was when Miku and Jabuko were having like a touching moment. And then Kurage was just like, "By the way, can I have an upgrade?"
Yeah.
In their touching moment.
At the weirdest moments, just like they're in the bath. Can I have an upgrade?
I need an upgrade, please. And then
he was begging for it.
And multiple times when she's about to get off, like when she's about to go out the door, he's like, "Goodbye, have a good day," and the door shuts on him.
Yeah. She's like up going to school, slam.
Meanwhile, the Kurage-san, the robot, is trying to give a cheerful goodbye, but gets denied because she couldn't care less about him.
I know, so sad, but kind of funny that he was just constantly begging for it, and then it finally happened. You're like, yeah.
And so, yeah, that was a funny little side character. And so the main point was the treehouse. We want to get to the treehouse. And so at first you were very suspicious because they were bringing in pallets.
Yeah, they were like, Pallets are not light. They were carrying them, weren't they?
Yeah, it's a two-man job, really.
Yeah, and they were carrying them, and in my mind, I'm like, damn, they're strong.
But also, how are they gonna make a treehouse out of pallets?
Yeah, because pallets are not made with the greatest wood. It's supposed to just be there for a forklift to easily carry heavy things. That's what a pallet is. So it's really cheap, like kind of scrap wood almost. So it's not great quality, and I was just like, they're using that?
And then I was like, oh, don't worry. And you're like, oh, fine. You were like, fine, don't. I was like, because I told you, like, don't worry about, like, the thing, right?
Yeah.
And then eventually you finally came to understanding why you didn't need to worry. Because turns out, the trash man came around and took away all the pallets.
Yep. Oh, they were breaking them apart too, which isn't easy.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple inch long nails in those, and there's like 24 plus nails in there
Yeah.
per pallet,
And they took it all down.
and I'm just like, they are some strong females, man.
And
Like,
so,
I struggle doing that.
it
They're
was
over there, like-
it was making Kokoro, the parkour girl who was doing it.
Yeah, she was just like, oh, this is easy. I'm like, damn, good for you. Holy crap.
You're athletic and all, but damn.
Like, you've been working out? Like, holy smokes.
And I remember she does show her muscles like a tiny little bump.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it was intentionally making fun, like, joking about that, like how they're, for some reason, unreasonably that strong.
Yeah.
And so, turns out, Pallet gets taken away to get all, like, quote-unquote depressed. And then they rebound from it, and then they eventually, like, go around asking for actual wood, actual wood.
Yeah.
And eventually they do make it, but I remember you commenting, you were just like, my god, it's so small.
Yeah, because, with a tree house, you have to work around the tree. And you only have so much room. So when they completed it, I guess it was the angle they were showing it at, but I was like, that almost looks like an extra large birdhouse. And then they're like, oh, let's all walk in, and that all 6 of them fit in there, or 5 of them, and I was like, the scale doesn't really match, but okay.
Not to mention when it was shown in distance, it was kind of tiny.
Yeah, it looked like an extra large birdhouse.
And
I
so,
was like, there's no way you can fit 6 people in there.
yeah, it was just, perspective is just weird. I guess they didn't, a lot of the, I don't know, like, who made the decision for, like, the size of the house, whatever. But I'm assuming they didn't have that much experience with tree houses. Or I would assume their tree houses that they had were, like, very tiny.
I guess. I mean, maybe it was a good size for a couple children, but these are high schoolers, right?
Yeah, high schoolers.
Yeah, these are like high schoolers. They're probably almost fully grown. Like, they're like 5 feet plus. Like, you'd have to like. It looked like you had to go on your hands and knees and crawl in.
Yeah, I think they did actually. But yeah, it was just tiny. Oh, by the way, they did. Speaking about the treehouse, they did do it correctly in terms of like the tree attachment bolts, and
Yeah.
starting with the bases of like the floor and everything. They did that correctly. Minus somehow them lugging up, I would assume, are like 30 pounds plus worth of wood up the tree.
Yeah, that and I do remember, if I remember correctly, they tore out part of the wall of the shack
Yeah,
to use as the treehouse.
the roof.
Yeah, I was just like, so do you not use the wooden shack anymore? Like, you just tore the roof off. I mean,
And it turns out they probably do still use it. I don't know. There's no second season. We'll never know until they do.
yeah.
And so, yeah, that was basically DIY the anime.
Oh, I do want to mention one other character.
Oh, go ahead.
I think probably both. Maybe not your favorite, but probably my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
The pig.
Whose name is Meat.
Yes, they have a pet pig named Meat.
Yeah,
And-
Serifu specifically Serifu.
Oh yes, sorry. Setafu's pet pig is named Meat, and probably my favorite character because it's literally just like in constant fear
Mm-hmm.
most of the time because they eat at least in the anime, they eat a lot of pork product.
Yeah.
And they have a pet pig, and they're eating pork in front of it, and the pig is just constantly on alert and aware if it's gonna get eaten or not that day.
It's just constantly traumatized.
Yeah, it's just traumatized. And then there was like one meal where they weren't eating pork, and it was like it could relax.
Yeah. It was
You had to
relaxing
relax
for
first.
once.
But all other meals were something to do with pork, and I felt so bad for the pig, but it was so funny.
Yeah, I remember him now. Ugh. And so, yeah, that was the DIY anime. What did you think overall as, I guess, two separate things, as an anime itself and then at, in the aspects of the DIY stuff?
Anime, I think what also caught me off guard with the animation was the style, like the drawing.
Yeah.
That did kind of throw me off because it's not your classic, anime art style.
Mm-hmm.
So that did take some getting used to, but after a couple of episodes, you're like, oh, it's not bad. You're like, okay, I can dig it.
Oh, it was definitely smooth. Like, the animation itself was smooth.
Yeah.
Very fluid, like, very human-like movements. It's just the art style itself was very different.
Yeah, it's something you don't usually see.
Yeah.
So other than that, I thought, it was a good anime. I like this little kind of story they had.
Mm-hmm.
If they came out with a second season, I'd probably watch it just because, it is an interest of mine. I did like doing all that woodwork kind of stuff with my dad. We even tried to do our own little woodworking business, but COVID kind of hit and we didn't really get that going. But if they did come out with the second season, I would watch it. I would hope meat is still in that second season.
And then what do you think about it in the DIY aspects?
In DIY, I'd say it's mostly accurate. There are a couple things just because I think it's just anime.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have to like speed things up a little bit. So other than that, I think it's pretty spot on. A couple things here and there, but you can't be that picky with it. It is an anime after all.
I would say real tools, real situations, but execution-wise, sometimes off.
Questionable.
Yeah, questionable or off.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And so for me, I enjoyed it just because I'm the anime watcher. Saki is not. And so obviously I enjoyed it just for what it's worth. I didn't really keep that in mind because again I didn't really know much about DIY itself, so I was just like, yeah, this one's good, But yeah, overall we both enjoyed it. If whoever is random but happens to watch this and is thinking about checking it out for do-it-yourself, I would say 100% check it out. It's a very comfortable time. I think
it's more like I want to say kind of like a feels good kind of anime.
Yeah, it definitely is. And so yeah, that's the anime. Unfortunately, we were thinking about talking about another anime. I didn't expect this anime talk to go for so long for this specific anime, but we will have to push that one back for another episode. So we're just gonna end the episode here today. So I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And this is The Casuals, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.